So guys, the signings are continuing to come in for Wolves. Pablo Sarabia is set to join the club in the next day or so. He's flying to England tomorrow to complete his medical at the club. Today we're going to be having a look at the transfer. I have a chat with a journalist about the player and what Wolves can expect as well. As always guys, be sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And a big shout out to our partners over at Football Prizes. Every week they've got a brand new Wolves memorabilia prize. And this week it is a Wolves signed Mateus Nunes shirt, nice and framed, so be sure to get involved in their prize draw. Ends on Wednesday. A link is down in the description. So Sarabia, what a signing this will be for Wolves. Really talented footballer, and it just looks like a very, very good deal for Wolves. A risk-free deal, you could say, due to the fee, which we'll talk about a little bit in a second. But really good piece of business. And once again, probably a signing that would not be possible with Julian Lopetegui at the club, and we've already seen that with a couple of the players that we are signing or looking at as well. The news first broke on, I think it was Thursday or Friday, the 12th of Jan, so only a few days ago, that Wolves had put in an offer for Sarabia, who has obviously been at PSG for a number of years now, signed in 2019, but a real big season for him was last year, which we'll have a word about in a second as well. But yeah, and made the inquiry to sign him on the 12th, which was Thursday, and then things continued really, really quickly. It was said on Friday that Wolves had an agreement for around €5 million plus bonuses, which could take it up to around €7 million. And yeah, it's been pretty much agreed now. He's going to be travelling to England in the next day or so to sign a 2.5-year contract, which will see him take his contract up until 2025. The PSG manager Gaultier pretty much confirmed it over the weekend, and he said he wishes Sarabia all the best and believes he can flourish in the Premier League. So let's have a quick look at Sarabia and his stats, because last year was a real big season for him because he was actually sent out on loan to Sporting. He wanted to get more game time. Of course, he wasn't going to get that with the front line that PSG have currently got, with the likes of Kylian Mbappe, Neymar, and obviously adding Lionel Messi to that last season as well. So he went out on loan to Sporting, had a phenomenal season. 29 games in the league, 15 goals and 8 assists. Champions League, he got 2 goals and an assist in 8 games. In the Taça de Portugal, 2 goals in 4 games for him as well. So overall, he scored 19 goals and got 9 assists for Sporting last season, which is a phenomenal record. Predominantly actually playing as a right winger for Sporting, scoring 10 goals from that position, but also played on the left, even as a centre forward and as an attacking midfielder as well. And that's where I'm really interested to see where Lopetegui will play him. Could play comfortably, pretty much across that front line. Probably, I can't see him as a number 9, but definitely as that left winger, number 10 as the attacking midfielder, or as a right winger as well. And I think with him, he's got the flexibility to roam and rotate into the different areas of the field, like we've seen, and like the players that we've got. I think Pedence can do that. I think Juan can do that. I think Cunha will be able to do that. Neto would be able to do that. Gedge, if he wants to play, can do that as well. So I think we've got those talented players that it's doable. And Wolves have got a really good deal here. Now, before I move on to the perspective on the player, around €5 million plus bonuses for Wolves to sign Sarabia, which I think is a fantastic piece of business. PSG, it's been said they want to get him off the wage bill, which I fully appreciate. He's got just over a year left on his contract, so he could have easily run that down. And there aren't many teams in football outside the Premier League that will probably afford the wages that he wants. But I think the Lopetegui pull is a massive, massive thing here. A lot of people comparing this to the João Moutinho deal, who even back, a number of years ago, we paid £5 million for. That has worked out to be a phenomenal deal for the club. But in today's market, to find a player of this calibre and quality to sign him for this sort of money is almost unheard of. So real great piece of business for Wolves. But now we'll move on to get the thoughts of French football journalist Jonathan Johnson. He's a big follower of PSG, and he gives us a little bit more insight on the player. So then, guys, delighted to be alongside Jonathan Johnson, who is a French-based soccer correspondent for CBS. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining me today. How are you?
Doing very well, thanks. And yourself? Thanks for
Yeah,
having me
all
on.
good, thank you. No, no problem. Jonathan is an avid follower, suppose, of PSG, who, of course, Sarabia is joining from, all being well. Jonathan, we want to let Wolves fans and football fans know a little bit more about the player. So, from what you've seen for him and PSG, what are his strengths as a player?
And I think one of the greatest strengths that Sarabia has is that he is extremely versatile. He can play anywhere, sort of across the attack. Obviously, he's better suited to sort of wing play, or if he's playing through the middle, to be sort of playing at least behind somebody who's more of a focal point of the attack. But I think if Wolves fans really want to see what Sarabia was all about, or Sarabia at his best for PSG, probably the run of games leading up to the COVID break, so sort of like early 2020, that was when he was really in his best form for PSG. It was a real shame, actually. Obviously, a huge shame that the COVID freeze happened when it did, but particularly in terms of Sarabia's form, because I felt it was probably at that moment that he really sort of lost his ability to maybe establish himself with PSG. I mean, you've got guys like Christophe Galtier, saying in press conference ahead of the Rennes game that Sarabia as a player he rated very highly, but the fact is that the player was unhappy. So I think it was natural, really, that Sarabia would feel that he didn't have the chances, necessary to succeed. And when you look at PSG's, attacking lineup, when you've got the likes of Mbappe, the likes of Neymar, the likes of Messi, guys who don't necessarily always gravitate towards playing in a fixed central role, that's always going to limit, Sarabia's time and possibilities. And the fact that he'd already been out on loan with Sporting Lisbon, that also, was a sign that perhaps PSG were not sort of counting on him in the long run.
Yeah, you mentioned there he's pretty comfortable playing across, that forward line. For you, as a watcher of PSG, where do you think he's played his best football? Where do you think he can make the biggest impact on Wolves? Because I think we've how Lopetegui sets up. We've seen it already a couple of times where he has used like a number 10, but obviously Wolves play with the wingers as well. For you, where's his best role? Do you think he'd work well with Wolves?
It's really interesting because there's a lot of similarities with Gonzalo Guedes as well, who obviously is a former PSG player and now plays at Wolves. I personally feel that Sarabia is best sort of in one of the wide attacking roles, but equally I do think that he can bring a bit of creativity. I'm curious to know exactly sort of how he'll adapt physically to the Premier League, because I think that will also dictate sort of where Lopetegui will be sort of tempted to put him in. Having seen him, sort of make the jump from La Liga to Ligue 1, which in itself is also quite a physical league. He certainly wasn't out of his depth, and I think Sarabia is a player who, his versatility will probably see him, played in a number of different positions to start with. But then again, Lopetegui's knowledge of the player, perhaps he has, a position that he specifically wants to see Sarabia in. It wouldn't surprise me if it was one of the wide roles. But like I said, I mentioned Gedge earlier. Again, another player who is capable of playing through the middle, but also out wide.
Yeah, things aren't going so well for Gedge at the moment at Wolves. It looks like he may be leaving this month, and maybe Sarabia is one of the players that Wolves are looking maybe to bring in as almost a replacement. But I'm hoping, I think the versatility of Wolves' front line in general, we've got many players, Mateus Cunha, Pedence, Wang, who can all play across that front line, and this is probably another player to add to that squad as well. I know you've mentioned the players, and we all know the players that PSG have got, Mbappe, Neymar, Messi, and so on. Sarabia had a really strong season. You sort of mentioned it there at Sporting. I think it was 19 goals and 9 assists in all competitions for him. Do you think one, were you surprised he stayed at PSG? Do you think in the summer they could have got a good amount of money for him? Or did PSG fans think that possibly he had a chance of trying to break into the PSG first team on a more regular basis?
I mean, I think there's a number of factors that contributed towards him staying at PSG for the first half of this season. One of them was the fact that despite the fact that he did extremely well with Sporting, and I'm sure they would have been delighted to keep him, economically, it was probably a non-starter, really. The only way that Sporting could get hold of a player like Sarabia, given sort of his salary at PSG, and the fact that he would have cost a significant transfer fee at the time as well, was to bring him in on loan. So I don't think there was ever really sort of any hope on their side that they'd realistically be able to keep him beyond that one season on loan. But I do think that perhaps if PSG had known sort of how their transfer window was going to play out, they might have been tempted to cash in on Sarabia very early on in the transfer window and try and use some of that money, some of that wage space to bring somebody else in, notably defensively. Because when you look at how little, or reasonably little, Sarabia has been used since the beginning of the season. Like I said, it's not because Galtier doesn't rate him, it's just because there's such competition for those places in attack. Let's not forget as well, Hugo Ekitike was wanted by the likes of Newcastle, before PSG managed to get him on an initial loan with a view to buying him. So, there were plenty of players ahead of Sarabia in that pecking order, and I can understand for him it must have been quite frustrating as well to come back off of such good form, with Sporting, a team who have caught many people's eyes, in the last sort of 12 months or so, especially the kind of football that they're playing under Amorim, their coach, who I think was even linked with the likes of Wolves and Aston Villa in the Premier League. So, I think Sarabia is somebody who needed this move, probably needed it maybe 6 months before it's actually come. But he's somebody who I think has a big point to prove, and somebody who will benefit as well from the fact that the coach knows the strong points and the weak points of his game, so will look to get the best out of him immediately without having to experiment too much.
Yeah, and one of the biggest talking points, I suppose, about this move is the transfer fee. It's been pretty heavily reported that it's going to be around €5 million, possibly creeping up to about 7 million with add-ons. I think, again, like this move, there's so many factors on why the fee is probably as low as it could be. Obviously, Wolves have got close ties with Jorge Mendes, who now has, sort of ties in with the PSG director of football there. I know he's on quite a big wage, and PSG want to let him go for that wage. But from your point of view, why is this fee as low as this? And obviously for Wolves, it looks like a really good deal right now. But €5 million surely is a steal for Wolves, isn't it?
I mean, it is a good deal, but realistically, I mean, PSG didn't actually break the bank to bring him in. If I recall correctly, it was probably around 20. So yeah, I mean, they're looking at best case scenario to not even be getting back 50% of what they put into him. But then you've got to factor in sort of the contractual considerations, and just the fact that, what would be the value really of keeping him on the wage bill, using him very intermittently, and not really being able to move him on for anything else at any point in the future. I think it was a question of taking the best offer possible. And also, the fact that PSG are willing to accept it suggests that Luis Campos probably has an idea in mind for what he would like to do with the funds that will be freed up, whether that's through the transfer fee or through the salary. I think probably the key factor in this deal happening, and why Sarabia is joining an established Premier League club and perhaps not going back to a La Liga, for example, is the fact that PSG won't have any of his wages, or shouldn't have any of his wages on the books, once the move does get completed. And in La Liga, it is difficult to find too many clubs who have that amount of space on their wages, given the wage cap. So, I think that's a big reason why Wolves are potentially able to get in and, get what looks like on paper, a fantastic bargain.
Yeah, as long as, I'm sure a lot of Wolves fans are hoping that as long as it's not a favour that we owe PSG in the future with maybe Ruben Neves or someone like that possibly moving to PSG. But for you, Jonathan, do you think, I know you mentioned about the player, his qualities, do you think Sarabia can be a success in the Premier League?
I don't see why he can't be. I think he is a player who, on his day, can look like a world beater. Like I said, he had that really hot vein of form at sort of end of 2019, beginning of 2020. He's had some fantastic moments for PSG as well. I mean, I'd advise Wolves fans to check out his goal. I think it was the equalising goal, last gasp away at Real Madrid in the Champions League, where he fires it in from the edge of the box. He is capable of some fantastic moments, but also, I think Sarabia was always one of those guys where you were never quite sure at PSG whether he'd be a fixture in the starting 11. He was almost a bit more of a luxury rotational player. And I think personally, you get the best out of Sarabia when he's guaranteed to be, a part of the manager's plans, and there's a clear, defined role for him in the starting 11. I think the new start will do him good, and like I said, he'll be very motivated. He's got a point to prove. Obviously, he has that World Cup heartbreak as well that he'll want to try and put behind him. So I think that ultimately, the ingredients are there for Sarabia to turn into a success. For Wolves, I don't necessarily think he'll hit the ground running, because I do think he's going to take a while to get really, sort of up to speed in terms of fitness again. It's been a bit stop and start for him, being involved in the World Cup, then not really being that involved with PSG. So I think, after a couple of weeks, finding his feet and, getting used to the pace of training and play, I think that he's somebody who could, offer something for Wolves between now and the end of the season, and much, much more, with a view to moving forward, especially as you'd assume that, with Lopetegui, it's going to be a long-term project.
Oh, let's hope so. Jonathan, thank you so much for jumping on Talking Wolves and giving us some insight on the player. I'll make sure I leave a link to Jonathan's socials in the description down below, so you can go and check him out. And I'll catch you next time, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me on. Always a pleasure, and chat soon.
So big thanks to Jonathan. I'll make sure I leave a link to his socials in the description if you want to go and check him out. But Pablo Sarabia is set to become a Wolves player. Guys, let me know your thoughts on this signing in the comment section down below. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you all next time.